everybody. It's nice to see our Korean history class students and some guests who are also here from Bali, from Shanghai. We have a distinguished guest also, Consul and some of the diplomats in training. So I hope this will be a really good networking opportunity and that you can have some time for a little more informal discussion after our formal program. And it's really my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Consul General Kim from the Korean Consulate here in Los Angeles. Come on in. Have a seat. So I want to give you just a little bit of background information before I turn over the floor. Consul Kim is currently serving as the Consul General of the Republic of Korea in Los Angeles, and he's been there since December of 2017. He joined the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 1990, serving in other diplomatic posts such as Japan, so sometimes we speak in Japanese together. Singapore, we speak in English, obviously. Chinese is not on the table. New York and Peru, also a Spanish speaker. So during the Q&A, if you'd like to ask questions in Spanish, please feel free to do so. Before coming to Los Angeles, Consul Kim served as the Director General for Overseas Korean and Consular Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He also worked as the Director for the East Asian Trade Bureau of the Ministry from 2007 till 2009, and Director for the Strategic Planning of the National Security Council in 2005. Consul Kim holds a BA in English language from Korea University of Foreign Studies, where he graduated in 1989. So that makes us about the same age. In 2017, he was honored as the Best Diplomat Award, voted by his peers at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Consul General Kim is married with 2 sons. He's a big fan of ball games, such as baseball, soccer, tennis, and he is an avid reader of history books. So please join me in welcoming Consul General Kim. Hello.
Okay, Professor Danny, thank you for your warm introduction and for having me here to honor the lecture series. And it is really honored and privileged to speak before such an outstanding audience like you on this beautiful and auspicious library of CSU Fullerton. Before I start, let me briefly introduce what we are doing at the Consulate General. As you may know, the diplomats at the embassy, usually located at the capital of the country, the receiving country. It's like the diplomat at the embassy, the functions of we consuls don't include the treaty negotiating authorities, such as free trade agreement and the security and the defense alliance on behalf of the country. But still, we consuls represent our country and people in terms of 3 major functions. First, we provide consular services, a variety of consular services to, for example, to more than 50 million Koreans and Korean Americans living here in Southern California, and 3 other states like New Mexico, Arizona, and Nevada. That's one area, and then also we issue visas for the American citizens and other legal residents living in the U.S. The second function we assumed as a consul is about the trade and the investment facilitation. we promote trade between our two regions. And for example, last year, we had more than 233 Korean companies enlisted in Korean stock market. 203 companies operating here and contributing to create more than 17,000 local jobs. And then also for the fiscal year of 2017, our companies invested here more than 470 million US dollars locally, contributing to the sound local economy. And with those combined effort, Korea is number 3 trading partner for Los Angeles area, and also for number 6, 6th largest trading partner for state of California. Particularly for the Los Angeles area, top 3 trading partners are all from Asia, China, Japan, and Korea. The ranking number 1, number 2, number 3. So that means the state of California and Los Angeles area belong to the Asia Pacific region, which was never conceived before World War II. So we are living in the age of the telecommunication and then the smaller world. And lastly, the last function we are doing is about people-to-people exchanges and cultural exchanges. Last year alone, we had more than 340,000 Koreans visiting this area, and then more than 2 million for the whole US. So that means we are living together at the opposite side of the ocean. So that is the figure. And also we attract a lot of the cultural event, like K-pop and K-dramas and K-movies. And that's what we are trying to do to promote friendship between our two regions and people. And then, as you may know, we also support the local US schools to introduce the Korean dual language program. You may experience at the junior and senior high school. So we have 29 schools which introduced the dual language program in the Los Angeles Unified School District, LAUSD. So that's broadly what we are doing at the embassy. But having said that, let me come on to today's topic, which is the geopolitics of Korean Peninsula and ongoing peace process. As you see in the chart of our lecture outline, first my lecture will focus on geopolitics of Northeast Asia and the Korean Peninsula. And the second will be U.S. Republic of Korea relations. And lastly, the denuclearization of North Korea with a focus on the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. As you look at the map, a couple of decades ago, at the beginning of the millennium, everyone predicted the 21st century will be century of the Asia. At that time, China was high flying with double-digit economic growth, and Japan started to regain its confidence away from decade-long recession in 1990s, and then around this area, the India and ASEAN 10 countries also poised for big takeoff at that time. But what about the prospect now, after a couple of decades later? Actually, Asia is still the. Let me say it. still the main source of world economic growth, but not like in the past anymore. You know why? The rise of China has become, a big bonanza for everyone in those regions. But it is rapidly becoming more of a challenge for many nations in the region. That is one reason. And another one, in the meantime, anti-globalization took momentum in the region. And also multilateralism grossly receded, shown in the China's Xi Jinping's ultra-nationalistic policies and the Brexit vote, and in the President Trump's the America First. That means multilateralism is receding. But under the circumstances, with this in mind, let me first begin my lecture with a focus in the Northeast Asia. Actually, as you see on the map, Northeast Asia include China and two Koreas and Japan, and together with Mongolia and Russia. But today, I'd like to focus on the CJK, the China, Japan, and Korea today, and its regional rivalry throughout the history. That's going to be helpful for you to understand the geopolitics of Northeast Asia. The total, if you look at the CJK versus US chart, the total GDP of CJK, China, Japan, and South Korea combined, is tantamount to that of USA. It's economics. I'm not good at dealing with it. All right, here. US GDP is about $19 trillion, almost same figure. But given China's population, together with Japan and South Korea, about 16 trillion population, and then China's low, the per capita income of less than $10,000. I guess the CJK's economy will rapidly growing. And then the Goldman Sachs predicted China will be #1 economy in the world by 2027, replacing the US. In terms of military capability and expenditures, the US is second to none. I mean, the US defense expenditure is considered bigger than that of other 10 top 10 the countries combined, let alone China, Japan, South Korea combined. It's about $602 billion. It's more than half of the total the world the defense budget. So that means even in the China's backyard of Asia, the US role as a balancer would not be challenged or compromised in the near future. But once North Korea is given or recognized as a nuclear state, the whole security metrics will change, and non-nuclear states in Asia, like Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea, and the nuclear-free ASEAN 10 countries, so they would not feel safe enough, even with the US nuclear umbrella, if the North Korea goes to nuclear. So the geopolitics of the surrounding Korean Peninsula would be very complicated, just like in the 20th century. To be specific, let me turn into the relations with China, Japan, and respectively. You see the Korea and China, northern eastern part of China. Actually, Korea's history in short is that of the survival from mainland heavyweight China, I mean heavyweight continent China. So throughout the 5,000-year long history, we have undergone more than 960 times of invasion, mainly from continent China, and a few from the maritime Japan on the right side. Yeah. And somehow we were able to maintain our heritage and identity by making sure the regional balance of power in the region. If you look at the history, in some cases, the Chinese dynasties were severely weakened or eventually perished due to the war against the ancient Korean dynasty like Goguryeo. You see Goguryeo here? Yeah, Goguryeo. But the Korean Goguryeo itself, perished in AD 668, by the allied forces of Chinese Tang and the Korean kingdom Silla. Chinese Tang on the center and the west, and then here is a small kingdom Silla and Baekje and then Goguryeo. The three kingdom era. So at the time, by the allied forces of Chinese Tang, and in the 7th century, Chinese Tang and the Silla kingdom, the two neighbors, the Baekje and Goguryeo, were perished. But if you look at the number from 2333 BC, when Gojoseon, our first kingdom, existed, through the 935, the birth year of Goryeo dynasty, for more than three the millenniums, for more than 3 millenniums, and the kingdoms such as Goguryeo around here, Goguryeo and Gojoseon, Goguryeo and Buyeo, the many kingdoms, they coexisted in the northern part of China currently. So that means they coexisted in the northern eastern side of China together with the other Chinese dynasties at the middle and west of the continent, Chinese continent. So that was our history. But from 935, when Korea unified the peninsula, losing most of the northern territory of Gojoseon and other kingdoms, maintained. From that time, we were able to maintain our identity within this the peninsula for more than 10,000 years, 1000 years. So that's the history, and then from 935, when Goryeo dynasty established, the Korea named after Goguryeo. So Korea came from Goryeo, in the Middle Age, but the Goryeo came from Goguryeo, this area, Goguryeo. So in 935, Goryeo dynasty adopted their #1 state policy as a North politic, by which meant regaining the lost glory of Goguryeo in terms of northern territory. So, however, the Chinese government since around 2005, has started the so-called Northeastern History Project, by which tries to distort the ancient Korean histories as its own local histories, as its local regime, causing unrest and indignation on the part of both Korea, South Korea and North Korea. So, but regardless of authenticity of argument, it is true that Koreans have succeeded in preserving its heritage, at least on the Korean Peninsula, since 935 AD without being absorbed into the Chinese continent. So it's kind of the miraculous journey for Koreans, to keep our identity for throughout the history as a small nation. And 2.5 million the ethnic Koreans currently living in northern part of China, particularly in north part of China, is rather a recent phenomenon after the Imperial Japanese occupation in 1910. So that means a lot of people escaped from the Korean Peninsula into northern part of China. So there are now, we have more than 2.5 million ethnic Koreans. Now they are considered Chinese, but they are ethnic Koreans. And then one more thing. And then during the Hideyoshi, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's invasion in 1572, it was the Chinese Ming Dynasty came to rescue with more than 200,000 soldiers. So in that sense, the Mao Zedong's army's Korean War involvement in 1950, more than 550 years later, reflects China's urgency and awareness of regional geopolitics. It's very complicated. So having said that, I cannot talk about too much about China and Chinese and Korean relations. And then the Korean War. The 33rd U.S. President Harry Truman once said regarding his decision to dispatch U.S. troops to Korea, like this. In the simplest terms, what we are doing in Korea is this. We are trying to prevent a third world war. So, the U.S. became, the key stakeholders on the Korean Peninsula after the Cold War. So they came in to rescue the South Korea in defense of freedom in our nation. So having said that, still we are demanded by China to choose a side between China and the U.S. It is tremendous pressure for us, given large economic leverage that China holds. To understand this, let me briefly touch upon the recent Korea-Chinese relationship. After the Korean War, we established our diplomatic relations with China in 1992, right after the fall of the Berlin and the breakup of Soviet Union. And just in 11 years, in 2003, China re-emerged as our #1 trading partner, replacing Japan and the US. Just in 11 years, that's the geological proximity, and the huge population and economic incentive. So in just 11 years. But now our total overseas exportation, more than 1/3 of it is going to China. So that means huge economic leverage in favor of China. So let me introduce just two cases. when I was working as a director for Asian Trade Bureau, covering China and Japan and East countries in terms of trade and investment. At the time, it took the trade dispute, which is called bilateral garlic dispute. At the time, to protect our agricultural market, agricultural industry, we imposed some additional tariffs against import of Chinese-produced garlic, processed garlic. And then the Chinese government threatened us to withdraw that the measure. And then suddenly they came up with imposing much higher retaliatory tariffs against our Samsung cell phone, more than 2 million units, Samsung cell phones, and it is much in terms of value, is more than 100 times higher. I mean the cell phone and the other product, the IT product. It has it has nothing to do with garlic. The trade, but they imposed a high level of tariffs against our IT product, and then we were forced to find middle ground, to accommodate the Chinese request. So the reason I'm saying is whenever it is necessary, Chinese traditionally, not just now, traditionally they want to teach a lesson for the smaller nations like us. So we accommodate those requests throughout the history to ensure our identity and our survival. So that's why we are very sensitive, to geopolitics. The threats not just coming from the China, not just coming from Japan, so from many places. So we diplomats should be very aware about the options we should take in those emergency cases. And what about Japan? Yeah, what about Japan? Regardless of the modern day historical dispute, our traditional ties with Japan was relatively warm and peaceful, except two unhappy historical events. As I said, Japanese invasion of the Joseon Kingdom in 1592 by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who virtually unified the medieval Japan for the first time in Japanese history. And second was Japanese occupation of Korea during 1910 and 1945 period. So, except those two historical unhappy events, most of the time we coexisted as brothers. For example, historically, there were three big waves of immigration from Peninsula into Japan. You see here. First one took place when the Kaya, the kingdom here, the red color, small country. The Kaya perished, besieged by bigger brothers of Shilla on the east side and the Baekje and to the west side. Besieged by two brothers, it perished at the end of the 2nd century, second century or third. So many of them immigrate or were forced to move into Japan. So what I'm trying to say, they were first iron civilization, steel and iron civilization at the second century in Korea. So we don't know why, but they were first, iron civilization. So they contributed a lot in Japan to the innovation of agriculture in Japan. So around end of the second and third century, beginning of the third century, Japan's population presumably was like 80,000 population. And then suddenly, 1 century later, it ballooned to 3.5 million population in Japan. So that means huge influence from the higher the people who escaped to Japan with the iron civilization, contributing agricultural tools and then kitchenwares by steam. It was innovation at that time. It's a huge innovation. And the second wave immigration occurred when the great king Hangeto, the great king of Goguryeo, he invaded the southern brothers of Baekje and Silla around the end of the fourth century. When it occurred, when it occurred, about 50,000 Japanese soldiers from Japan. In ancient times, the 50,000 Japanese soldiers came to rescue the ally Baekje, the brother country. So even Baekje's king was killed at the battlefield, and Hangeto's invasion caused massive refugees into Japan from both Silla and Baekje kingdom, because they didn't want to evade the enslavement or killings. And the third was the 7th century, when the fall of Baekje and Goguryeo occurred. Baekje in 660 and Goguryeo in 668. 1 century later, the Japan, formally as a kingdom, Japanese kingdom established with a huge influence from the Korean Peninsula. According to many historical documents. The Japan at the time was also not a unified country at the century of 7th century, and divided into many coalitions. And Kaya was the first outside advanced world with the iron civilization for Japan. So Japanese called Kaya as Kara, right here, Kara. So what does Kara mean in Japanese? So they called Kaya as Kara. The first, the outside advanced culture, advanced country in Japan. So after Kaya's collapse, Kara meant Baekje. And later the whole Korean Peninsula. Kara meant whole Korean Peninsula. For the source of civilized, the civilization. I'm not saying civilization. The advanced cultures. They took import from the Korean Peninsula. So first it was Kaya was Kara, and second Kaya was Baekje, and lastly Kara was the whole Korean Peninsula. But by the time of 7th century, when Tang Dynasty in China flourished, the Kara meant Tang Dynasty. So that shows how the Japanese persuasion and recognition changed over the history. So, until the Hideyoshi invasion in 1592, Korea and Japan co-prospered for the most part, like other country, but particularly modern Japanese colonization of Korea and the different historical views on that invasion have become the most destabilizing factor in the bilateral ties now. And the main players over the Pacific, I mean U.S. So what does U.S. mean for Korea after World War II? After Japan's unconditional surrender in August 1945, by accepting Potsdam Declaration in 1945, Russia, just like in Eastern Europe, advanced into former Japanese occupied Manchuria. Manchuria is around here. Manchuria and North Korea. Russia started to occupy the former Japanese occupied Manchuria and North Korea. The Korean Civil War in 1950 could be best understood in the context of Cold War. So luckily, South Korea was on the winning side of it. So Korea, in a word, is the most successful of the U.S. foreign policy, foreign diplomacy in Asia. So thanks to the U.S. support, Korea is the most westernized in terms of democracy and market economy. So historically, we owe much of our independence to America. Thousands of missionaries at the beginning of the 20th century, they came to the Korean Peninsula, and they enlightened us with an idea of a free nation and helped to introduce modern Western education in Korea. So, and furthermore, without the U.S. decisive role in the World War II, Korea's independence might have been delayed for much longer period of time. So, but just like her Taft-Katsura agreement, you may know, between U.S. and Japan regarding trade-off of Korea and the Philippines in 1905. The U.S. also made another mistake to exclude Korea out of the Atchison front line, Atchison security line in 1949. A year earlier, the Korean War broke. So it gave her the misjudgment to North Korea. They may invade South Korea because the Korea was out of her line to Japan from the U.S. point of view. So Japan is enough to contain, the whole continent, the communist China and Russia. So it was a miscalculation at the time. So both U.S. and Korea paid huge, the cost to reach you. So Korea's feeling about the U.S. is mixed in a sense. However, Koreans predominantly are grateful and value the U.S. role as a regional balance. So I talked about the geopolitics over China, Japan, and U.S. And then let's look into North Korea. North Korea is a little bit bigger than South Korea, the territory of North Korea. So the whole, the Korean Peninsula is the half the size of the California. Yeah. But we have about 80 million population, which is about the size of the German population. So in terms of population, we are not that small. But in terms of territory, the Korean Peninsula is 44 times smaller than that of China. And China is huge. We are 44 times smaller than China in terms of territorial size. The North Korea, the North-South regime competition after the Korean War virtually ended with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1990. And now our GDP is 44 times bigger than that of North Korea. And those chance to win a war by traditional means, traditional means of weapons system, I think is almost zero. The competition already ended between South and North. And with no trustworthy lifeline support coming from the China and Russia in 1990s, and North Korea, started to develop weapons of mass destruction. That means they cannot win the war by traditional means. So they started to develop nuclear weapons, both nuclear and ICBM programs. So alongside with the 5,000, alongside with the 5,000 tons of chemical weapons and 15,000 units of long-range artillery, together with the nuclear stockpile. So they tried to develop asymmetrical the power, like nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and long-range artillery. That was their tactic. Particularly, nuclear program has been the most important 3 generations wide, from Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-un, and current Kim Jong-un. 3 generation wide task of Kim's family for the maintenance of the regime and under the asymmetrical security environment. So, but finally, in the New Year's address in January 2018, the new leader Kim Jong-un declared it had achieved these goals, this great task, signifying that the regime was now ready for negotiation as a nuclear state. So they certain amount of sophistication they achieved by year 2017 by provoking a lot of nuclear and medium-range missile tests. So, but because this nuclear arsenal itself does not automatically provide the bread for the people, for the regime to ensure the survival for the generations to come, indeed the better economy on the medium and long-term basis. So, but for the North, the threat is not just coming from the South and the U.S. As you saw in the history of Korea, in case of a state emergency, China, if not Russia this time, Russia came to reoccupy North Korea from Japan in 1945. And China, if not Russia this time, could be the first to advance to take control, given the geopolitics on the Korean Peninsula. So if there is any emergency happening in the North, it's not just South Korea together with the US, but maybe China or Russia. So everybody has stake on the Korean Peninsula. So they have fear, North Korea themselves have fear, not just against US, but US and South Korea, but also their neighboring countries too. So that's why North Korea would not abandon all existing weapons and weapons program in a day, without getting substantial guarantees of regime survival and economic incentives. You know, the Ukraine, located in Central Asia. Ukraine, made independence from Soviet Union in 1990s, and then they had their own nuclear stockpile. So the world had to demolish those stockpiles. So at that time, the U.S. Together with Russia and Europe, they introduced multilateral guarantee. They committed multilateral guarantee of security for the Ukraine. But in 2014 and 15, the Putin's army, started to, occupy what is it? The Crimea, the island, regardless of this commitment. But anyway, the Ukraine's denuke case in 1990s with the U.S., Russia, and Europe's multilateral guarantee of security could be applied to North Korean denuclearized case, but with much slower tempo, making sure having dividend of the denuke on the part of North Korea. But the Ukraine did it in a day without any condition, just getting the security guarantee from both U.S. and Russia and the European countries. But Kim Jong-un's regime will not satisfy with those commitments. They need to boost their economy, the lifting the international sanctions regime for their country. So for their economy to grow, they have to anyhow, succeed to lift the international sanctions. That's their supreme task. So that's why we think this is the right moment to solve the deadlock. Even though the second Trump-Kim summit didn't produce immediate outcome, I think we are on the right track. I mean the U.S. wants a complete deal by which covers from the start to exit, and thereafter the U.S. is able to negotiate the starting point, while the North Korea at the starting point ask a partial sanctions relief regarding civilian life related oil and coals, which is critical for their economy. So usually North Korean export of coal is accounted for more than 1/3 of their income, because they don't have a factory, they don't produce any manufacturing goods. So coal contribute more than 1/3 of their income for the North Korean government, but it was blocked to export under the international sanctions regime in place. So they have to do something about it, and also they need to import fuels from China. So until 2 years ago, so somehow the North Korea succeeded in importing oils necessary by many means. Some the imported from China. Some did it on the ship-to-ship trade in the high sea. So without being noticed, by international watchdog. Somehow it happened, but with their nuclear and missile test in 2017, the much stronger international sanctions regime was in place. So there was not much loophole for them to, take advantage of. So the international sanctions regime really bite the North Korean economy. So anyway, in second meeting in Hanoi for the President Trump and Kim, they provided dismantlement of a major nuclear facility in Yeonbyeon in exchange for partial relief of sanctions, but the U.S. didn't take it, didn't buy it. But on the part of the Korean Peninsula, this is a meaningful gesture for the first time, relating to the whole program in Yeonbyeon on the part of the North Korea. So before, never, the North Korea committed they will dismantle whole, program and whole infrastructure of Yeonbyeon, almost 80% of the nuclear facility in North Korea. So that will be a starting point. If we give this, the U.S. should give us like the oil and coal, the ban, on them, and then partial relief on certain economic items. But without, the pictures from beginning to exit, so U.S. could not read to the North Korean terms. So, but still, we think it's not a total failure. It's a process of it's the ongoing process. I mean, it depends on much on the working level officials' work. So everything cannot be solved by the summit meeting. Usually, when we hold summit, we will set guideline and rules, from beginning to end, and then the substantial, the details should be worked out by working level officials. That's usually, it's customary usually. So even though the U.S. and North Korea didn't get a deal this time, we think it will be one step backward for the two step forward. That's our Korean government behind the summit. For example, 1987 INF Treaty. INF means Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty between the United States and Soviet Union in 1987. It did not come by accident. So President Donald Reagan and Gorbachev of Russia worked out of their second meeting in Reykjavik in Iceland. They work out. But a year later in 1987, the two leaders broke up in 1986 in Reykjavik. But a year later, in 1987, so finally two countries got the INF treaties in place for their mutual nuclear reduction. The two leaders didn't reach the agreement at Reykjavik, though many diplomats and experts consider the summit a turning point in the Cold War, mutually reducing their nuclear arsenal. 1987. So I will stop here. A lot of things to explain. I worked in Japan 2 times. First in Tokyo and second in Osaka. Also, I worked as a director for the Asian Trade Bureau, covering China, Japan, and ASEAN 10 countries. So there are many cases, practical cases to speak to you, but I want to stop here, and I'd like to take questions that you may have. So regarding any topics, Japan, China, US, or trade relations, and
Great, thank you. Okay, so he's graciously, I know he has another event to get to tonight, but we do have some time for questions. Joe, just stand up and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Joe. I had a question concerning, back on the GDP chart, you had the South Korea there listed as a 1.5 trillion. What do you think the GDP would be for United Korea? Because I know North Korea, I was reading that they had about, I think about $1 trillion worth of minerals in the mountainside that they can't mine. But hypothetically, if both North and South were united, what would be the combined GDP? I'm just curious. Or is that?
As I said, the North Korean GDP is 44 times smaller than ours, but they have a huge potential. They have the rich natural resources in northern part of Korea, and then they have a population more than 25 million population. So together with North Korea, even though we are short of population of Japan and a little bit short of the territory of Japan, but still we have a huge potential because the most part of North Korea is not developed. That means with our resources and technology into North Korea, there is a huge opportunity. There will be huge opportunities. So, for example, we operated the Kaesong Joint Industrial Project since beginning of 2000, and then it helped a lot the North Korean economy at the time. So nowadays, more than 80% of our consumer goods circulating in North Korean market that are from China. But at the beginning of 2000, it was about half and half. From China and from Korea, trade was like if there are 10, 4 from China, 4 from South Korea, and 2 from Japan, from other ASEAN countries. But now it's like none. We don't have any relationship with North Korea. So that means with just one joint project, it will be a good opportunity for North Korea and also opportunity for South Korea too. So with the unification, I guess in 2 or 3 decades, so we will be high flying like China in the 2 decades.
Great, Isaiah, and then George after, yeah, and then Patrick.
Have you heard in the United States, the U.S. Justice Department is suing the Chinese company Huawei because it's a big national security concern, and we don't allow them the phones on our government property. I was wondering if there was a big concern about Chinese companies in South Korea at all, or not really, like, because you guys have Samsung, but these Huawei phones are becoming really popular, and some countries think they're a national security concern. So I was wondering if there was that same concern in South Korea.
Yeah, we do have concerns against our technology going into Chinese market. But for the last 2 decades, China was our big, the opportunity. I mean, our company to increase our investment, and then to sell product, not just in China domestically, but also for other markets, U.S. and European countries and ASEAN market. So we used the Chinese platform as our trade facilitation. But in the process, many technicians, even from Samsung and Hyundai and then the automotive company, which is Sang-yong, so we had a concern, regarding our technicians being recruited into Japan, Chinese companies, together with technology. So we are very worried about it. And also, since the beginning of 2000, there were confrontations between U.S. and China in terms of the security and then how can I say, the intellectual property right. So when I was working in New York, at the time I belonged to Consulate in New York. At the time, a Chinese company tried to purchase some ownership of the port facility, but the U.S. Department of Security, Homeland Security, they didn't allow. I mean, it can be used. It can be used for the detriment of the U.S. interest. The same thing happening in all of the industries. So that's usually the government give permission for one company to transfer their technology to another company, another country. So usually we have a controlling right. But in the case of the U.S., I'm not sure, but your ministry also have such a system. If that related to core technology, like a 4G or 5G, the generation. In those cases, certainly we will not allow for that to occur. Not just industry, but also the M&A. M&A means merger and acquisition.
After you ask the question, you can sit down again.
Hi, my name is George. I had a question about Peru. I think you said that you saw
Peru.
What other countries, what relations you have with the other South American countries, and the same thing with Peru? Just interested in that.
Actually, I worked in many countries. 3 times in Asia, Japan, Singapore, and Myanmar, and 2 times in the U.S. and once in Peru. But Peru was one of the most, the favorite place I have worked with. I mean, they have virtually everything, from high mountain of Andes, the more than 2,000 miles over coastal line and desert, and they have rich natural resources like bronze, silver, and whatever the industrial material. So actually they have everything. So that's why when I was working there from 2010 and 2012, so my main work coverage was regarding economic investment. So our company M&A some of the oil field, and then some of the natural resources field. So together with a joint venture with the Peruvian companies. So it was very wonderful experience to live there. And above all, they have a wonderful the food, cuisine, including maritime cuisines. So you can visit there. It's one of the most delicious dishes there.
I know a lot about that area. I'm from Bolivia, so yeah.
Oh, really?
Great. Patrick, did you have a question?
I did. So I'm Patrick, and then in the event that Korea does unite,
Speak up, okay?
in the event that Korea does unite, how would South Korea improve North Korea to the extent where it could match the current GDP?
In case of German unification, still, the per capita income, individual income, the people from Eastern Germany, still is about 2/3 of the people belong to the Western Germany. Still there are income gaps, after almost 3 decades. So we cannot overcome those, the gaps, and and some discrimination or benefit. So we suddenly introduce, the system, the step by step. But I don't know which form of unification we indicate. I mean, in case of Germany, the physical unification, in terms of the ideology, in terms of market, in terms of land and population. But in case of unification on the Korean Peninsula, so we don't know. Maybe two systems, like China and Taiwan and Hong Kong, two systems and maybe one economy. We don't know. So we should have a lot of options, according to the forms of unification. But still, we are accumulating our fund. When we have a unification, we will input our resources into the project in the books. It cannot be solved overnight. But many people will immigrate from north into south. But the North Korean regime one welcome for that to happen. So there should be some the restriction, limitation for the people to move in. For the services and goods, maybe it's pretty flexible. For the people, I'm not sure. Without the German style full, the unification, so I don't have comment.
Yi-Kwan.
Hi, this is Yi-Kwan Kim. I have two quick questions for you. Who will be the major drivers in case the Korean Peninsula, the unification process actually move on, actually begin sometime soon, and who will be supporting the process? You can compare with the German situation, because all the neighboring countries around Germany, they are really supportive of that whole unification process. But in Korea, I really don't see any of the countries around is really supporting that. And then second, follow-up question is how much the Korean population actually supporting the unification process at this moment. I left Korea in 1985, and I finished my high school there. I came to the United States, and I don't know what changes since then.
Yeah, in case of a German unification, the timing was excellent, with the almost breakup of the Soviet Union, and then the U.S. support. There was no resistance, from continent like France and other, Britain or other, the neighboring countries. So timing was so nice, but I don't know on the Korean Peninsula. So if we want to unify each other by our will between Korean people, so still we don't know some other big, the brothers, big, the heavyweights like China and Russia. So everyone has stake on the Korean Peninsula. So we don't know, but North Korea says, always say 민족끼리 between us, without Western process, without exterior process. But they are saying in word, but I don't know their intention. But in case of nuclear issues, we cannot handle it between ourselves. So I mean, for the North Korean economy to recover, they need international assistance from Japan, from China, from US, and also from the South. So we cannot sit on the driving seat regarding the nuclear issues. That's why the US and North Korea are trying to solve it bilaterally first, and then they want to introduce the multilateral guarantee from China and Russia and Japan. So because we have to input a lot of money into North Korean territory for them to recover from current economy. But our policy, our President Moon, insisting we should be on the driving seat as the owner of the issue on the Korean Peninsula. We should not let others to decide our destiny. Almost same commitment from North Korea too, but reality is a little bit different.
FT, and then I'd like at least one question from one of the ladies in the room. So FT, you have the floor, and then ladies, think of something good.
Question corner.
So my name's Ford Thomas. You mentioned a couple things you like about Peru. Can you tell me a few things you found interesting when you were working in Japan?
Actually, I speak Japanese like native Japanese. I worked there more than 6 years. I worked there for 5 years, and I studied in Keio University for 2 years, from early years in 1990s. But lastly, working in Osaka in 2004, I never returned to Japan. But still, I'm following up, updating issues relating to Japan. Actually, I have a very good, how can I say, feeling. We can build the future together with Japan, but still the past being a barrier for us. But last March 1st was the 100th centennial anniversary. I mean, 100 years ago in 1919, our people, not just in Korea but also in the U.S., in China, they uprised for the independence, for their right to self-determination for the people and for the land. And it's 100 years. That even after our liberation in 1945, it's almost 70 years. So we have to put our past behind, and we have to, work in hand in hand for the bright future. I think it's possible. So we share the core value of democracy and market economy, and then two most developed, the nations in Asia. So actually, when we talk with the Japanese, so we have a very shared, the opinions and. Anyway, we have to let history, decide our future. So we have to be positive and constructive. Also in relation with China too. China, many times China came to help the Koreans in terms of civilization, in terms of letter. We borrowed the kanji, Chinese characters from China. We use it in our own way. And then also we introduced Confucianism from China for the almost five centuries during the Joseon dynasty. So it was the most important, the philosophy of living and religion. So we share a lot, but still we do competition for the survival and for the prosperity. So that's why I decided the lecture title, the Geopolitics of Northeastern Asia. So I hope you understand a little bit of the situation here. You can taste it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
we have any final questions, or? I was thinking too, with our future diplomats in the back, by the time you guys have kids, maybe they'll be here as the Consul General for the next generation. So thanks to all our guests, and a big thank you for
Thank you for your perseverance, endurance. I cannot speak, like you in this field.
All right, so we're a little earlier than our regular time, but we'll see you next week back in our regular class. All right? Feel free to linger and chat with our guests here if you'd like to.